Well, Rich, welcome back to the hallowed halls of the AGC.
Well, thanks, Joey. It's good to be invited. Come back and hang out with old friends and colleagues and take a look at the Eric W. Ryberg Award. And this is something that many years ago, association leadership felt like, you know what, we need to honor some of the industry titans or the giants that have built the state.
You know, Rich, as we look to honor men and women in the industry each year with the Eric W. Ryberg Award, I'll be candid. There's a lot of questions about it. Who is Eric W. Ryberg? And that next generation really doesn't understand the man behind the name. And we're hoping that you can give us some insight to that.
It's a great idea. The Eric W. Ryberg Award is the top award given in Utah's construction industry, bar none. It's equivalent in our industry to the Academy Awards.
Well, you know, looking back at the old archives of the AGC board minutes, I do know that Eric W. Ryberg, of course, was our chairman of our board and president in 1924, but truly one of the founding fathers of the AGC from the very get-go in its humble starts in 1922.
Eric W. Ryberg set a high bar. He's the one that said, hey, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We're going to be honest. We're going to do quality work. And a lot of that just goes back to these early generation leaders of AGC.
The award has that great prestige and honor, but to have the knowledge of who Eric W. Ryberg is and was would elevate it even that much further.
Future generations need to know who this person is, and they need to understand what he has done to set a high bar for the construction industry here in Utah.
Eric W. Ryberg was born June 26, 1884. As time marches on, many in Utah's construction community don't fully understand the Eric W. Ryberg story, nor the gravity of the mantle placed upon those chosen to receive the award that bears his name.
I'm here because I am a granddaughter of Eric W. Ryberg. I am the oldest surviving grandchild. So as far as remembering the actual man, I'm it.
I'm a recipient of the Eric Ryberg Award, for which I'm very grateful. And I'm a grandson of Eric W. Ryberg.
What I remember personally is a tall, slender, jovial, good man who loved his family dearly, provided for them amply, and enjoyed his grandchildren immensely.
I remember him just as a small boy. I remember sitting in a hotel with him, having breakfast, and he telling me I could have all the pancakes I wanted for breakfast.
I remember his generosity, his friendliness with people. He loved all kinds of people. He traveled the world and met wonderful people who became lifelong friends.
He was respected by his family. All his daughters adored him. His son admired him. Well, I remember as a boy going out to Lagoon on the old highway, the rippity-bumpity concrete, and I was complaining about it. And I remember my father saying something like, well, you better be careful because your grandfather Ryberg built this road.
Well, we do have a photo in our collection of my grandfather standing outside his car, feeding a bear that's up on its feet, and my grandmother peeking out the window of the car and doing that. That's a fun photo. He obviously had no fear of that bear. Grandpa was born in Sweden, Gothenburg, Sweden, Göteborg if you're Swedish. They immigrated when he was still an infant. Came across the plains to Logan, not under particularly comfortable situations. They were poor, they were struggling, they were trying to find a new life.
My mother said there was a period of time when she could not even send a letter back to her home in Sweden because they did not have sufficient money to buy postage. She said she did so want to tell them about herself and their new home. There is a Scandinavian custom in which the firstborn is known as the mother's oldest trust. I was not only her errand boy, but I was also her housemaid. It was my job to scrub the floors in the kitchen, which served as the dining room and living room. This scrubbing was done on my hands and knees with homemade lye soap and hot water.
He very quickly started looking for work as a young man, doing odd and interesting jobs. And the wonderful thing is, it's the perfect American dream story because he overcame and became a wonderful human being in his community.
Eric W. Ryberg's journey toward a life of significance is not without mischief and milestones of learning. Eric once set out to play a prank on a Logan City resident named Toby, who had made a habit of occupying the hotel porch chairs for hours on end, chairs meant only for hotel guests.
I secured a large 10-cent firecracker and attached it to one of the rungs of the chair in which Toby was accustomed to sitting in. Then I waited for his arrival. The mischievous kid that I was, I sneaked up behind him and lit the fuse. It blew the chair to smithereens and almost blew Toby up through the trees.
He was a bellman at a hotel. In fact, for a while, he moved into the hotel run by a sweet woman who befriended him, and he became kind of her right-hand guy.
Mrs. Hanks taught me many cultural habits. A good woman that she was, she not only taught, but she inspired the extension of courtesy and politeness. I learned to love her as a second mother.
When he was the bellman, he met all sorts of influential people coming through Logan. But they were businessmen, traveling salesmen, a lot of them. He saw people who were honest and who weren't.
I learned to develop an observation, to see for myself what was to be done, and do it without having someone tell me what to do. There was one man. He had one of the finest thoroughbred ranches on the Pacific coast. I remember his advice: be fair, but always be square. Since then, I have been involved in many transactions, and that thought has come to mind, which has promoted incentive to never take advantage of the situation over another, even if the opportunity affords itself.
And Grandpa became a very firm man in his honesty and his fairness, and he wanted to do things the right way, and he didn't want to compromise his principles to please another.
While I was engaged in the contracting business with my brother Bill, we were contacted by a local businessman to go to Oregon to look over his lumber railroad and do some underpinning and foundation work on bridges and trestles. He met me in the old Thatcher Bank and advised me that he could furnish a pass for our prospecting trip from Logan to Oregon, and that if we were successful and were awarded the job, the transportation would not cost us anything. But if we did not give a low enough bid, we would have to reimburse him for the transportation. I was somewhat taken back and could not answer him at the time. I later sent word saying if he was that small, he could go to hell and take the railroad with him.
Eric W. Ryberg attended Brigham Young College of Logan and the Utah Agricultural College, today's Utah State University. Eric was married in the Logan Temple in 1909 to Charlotte Critchlow of Hiram, Utah. By 1912, Eric and Charlotte had moved to Salt Lake City, where Eric and his brother William partnered together to form Ryberg Brothers Construction. They worked on public works such as conduits, sewers, bridges, and street paving. It was a small start.
And the story goes, it was with a wheelbarrow and a shovel. And as they made money, they bought more tools and expanded. Grandpa and his brother Bill had homes together on Fillmore Street, and they shared a driveway, which I thought was unique, but they obviously got along well together. And the grandpa built his home there.
During World War I, Ryberg Brothers Construction became active in the essential war industries, working with the Garfield copper smelter and refinery. The The Utah copper industry supplied a third of the copper used by the Ally forces.
Grandpa and his brother Bill got tired of hand mixing all their own concrete and thought they would start a gravel business where they could get better concrete. And they saw the need for it. That's where they started, was on Beck Street, and they bought other sand deposits in the valley. I joke that construction in our family is a genetic flaw. I'm third generation contractor, don't know how to get out of the business, but it takes a love of working with your hands and working with your head and working with people. And I learned that from my father. Well, I think in many ways learned it from his father-in-law, Eric Ryberg.
It was said by one local paper, scorning the political chicanery that sometimes gets entwined in large-scale projects, the Rybergs built up their business by sheer excellence in preparing their materials, strict adherence to standards and promises, and an extraordinary ability to deliver the goods. Utah sand and gravel grew into a sprawling construction empire throughout 7 western states, furnishing heavy track ballast for railroad construction throughout Utah, Nevada, and Wyoming. Their gravel, ready-mix concrete, and furnished material served landmark projects throughout Utah, including the Salt Lake City Municipal Airport built in the 1930s.
It was during the time of the Depression, and jobs were hard, and times were hard, and things were hard. Well, my mother thought that she should get a job to help within the family. And Grandpa told her he didn't want her to get a job. He wanted whatever job she would get to go to a man who's trying to feed a family, and that he would have that job, and that my mother would be taken care of by him, and that those jobs ought to go someplace else. And I just thought that was part of his character.
I remember him sitting on the porch of his cabin, visiting with everyone and anyone. One individual that he really befriended was a man we called Old Dutch Henry. He was a homesteader up by Hebgen Lake, Montana, where the Rybergs had their cabin. He and my grandfather would sit on the porch for hours chatting, one in Swedish and one in German, and somehow they understood each other. Old Dutch Henry didn't make a lot of money on his land, and the taxes came up and he could not pay them. He came over on his horse to Grandpa at the cabin and told him his troubles, and Grandpa said, "Henry, I will pay your taxes as long as you live, and you can stay on the property as long as you deed it to me before you're gone." So that happened, and that's been a wonderful blessing to our family. That's where many of us have built subsequent cabins and have access to the lake, and we thank Old Dutch Henry and we thank Eric W. Ryberg because we love that place too. He was very service-oriented, and he was very faithful in his church to be helpful there. He's on several boards. The list is, about like that, but he was on the committee that placed the This Is the Place monument, Utah-Idaho Sugar, which doesn't exist anymore, but he had a great deal to do with that, and actually, I think, helped pull it out of a very difficult financial situation. I've got a letter from President Heber J. Grant, and he thanked my grandfather for a very generous donation towards building the very first primary children's hospital. And that's important to me because I remember going to primary and bringing pennies when it was my birthday to help raise money for that hospital. And then he also took over from President Grant the task of raising money to complete the hospital.
The Salt Lake Tribune reported, Eric Ryberg was one of the most substantial citizens of the Intermountain West. Mr. Ryberg will be sorely missed, but his influence for good, his splendid achievements, will live long after him.
And now that we have a greater understanding of who Eric W. Ryberg was and who he truly is as an individual, I hope this next generation feels inspired by that and has a desire to truly want to give back to the community, not for the recognition of the award, but for truly the opportunity to better themselves because they knew who he was.
It's the pinnacle of community give back. It's the pinnacle of construction leadership. It's the pinnacle of being involved in community and for the greater good. Now that sounds like it's more than construction, and you know what, it really is. The Ryberg Award signifies people who build people. This is a people business we're in, and we build people.